Hello, friends, and welcome to Mousterpiece Melodies, a podcast that's listening to the songs of Disney movies past and present. I'm Josh Spiegel.
And I'm Scott Renshaw. Thanks for joining us on this comprehensive and encyclopedic compendium of all things Disney music. Now playing the Aristocats.
Yes, that's right. If you listened carefully to the end of our last episode, we were going to be talking about the Country Bears. I can barely stand the fact that we had to pause that episode. We'll do that in 2 weeks. And in case you're wondering, will I make stupid jokes like that 2 weeks from now? Do you have to ask? I don't think you do. We're talking about cats today instead. I'll figure out some other stupid cat puns today. But anyway, before we get into our discussion, thank you for listening. No matter how you're checking us out, we hope you like what you're hearing. With jokes like that, how could you not? And if you are enjoying it, we'd appreciate it if you could rate and review Mousterpiece Melodies on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever app you're using to listen.
That's right. Let everyone know how much you love the show and tell your friends to do the same. You can follow me on Blue Sky at Scott Renshaw and read my film criticism at cityweekly.net.
And you can follow me on Blue Sky at Mousterpiece, where I believe by the time you're hearing this, we will now be in the second round of the nonsense March Madness style bracket that I do about Disney animation. I believe the Aristocats already got eliminated because I may or may not have deliberately stacked the deck so that it would not be able to get through the first round, potentially hinting at my opinion of the film overall. But anyway, you should be following me there because I'm, of course, posting those daily brackets. I also write at publications like Episodic Medium, Crooked Marquee, and others. You can also email me at masterpiececinema@gmail.com with any comments, questions, or opinions you'd like to share. All right, now that all the housekeeping is out of the way, let's get into our discussion of the songs of the Aristocats. And to do that, we are thrilled to bring into the show a very special guest. He is a freelance pop culture critic whose work can be found at publications like the AV Club, Vulture, and the New York Times. Noel Murray, welcome to Mousterpiece Melodies. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm just going to say it's perfect to be here.
There you go.
And I hope that my appearance will not be any cause for concern.
Me, ouch.
See, my favorite part is that some of these are exactly the kinds of puns we can make in 2 weeks, because bears have claws too, and fur that they don't fur. But anyway, we are, kidding aside, Noel, we are thrilled to have you with us to talk about the songs of the Aristocats. This is, of course, the 1970 animated feature from Walt Disney Pictures featuring the voices of Ava Gabor, Phil Harris, Hermione Baddeley, and many more. It is the story of Duchess, the mother of 3 kittens. They lived the high life in Paris circa 1910 until one day the butler, who works for their owner, gets it into his head that whole cats have 9 lives thing is scientifically accurate. And when he realizes that this woman's vast fortune will be going to her cats, not to him, he decides to put matters into his own hands. They end up in the countryside of France. Duchess falls in love with a rascally alley cat named Thomas O'Malley. He has questionable pronunciation of the rest of his name, which we can get into later. Yes, it's a laid-back romance, comedy, adventure thing. Now, as we often like to start these discussions, I'm going to throw it over to Noel first, and then Scott, and then myself. You were both, I can safely say you were both alive when this movie came out in theaters on Christmas Eve 1970. Did either of you see this in theaters, though? I don't know if this is the case. Did either of you see this when it came out originally?
I did not. Now, so you say I was alive. I was like 2 months old. I was born in September of 1970. So,
that counts. That still counts.
I don't know if I was taken to the theater or not. I don't have any memory of actually seeing this movie until maybe one of the reissues or maybe on TV. I think I was a little bit older. My main memory with this movie, and I'll come back to this later, is that I had the album. I had the actual vinyl album when I was a kid. It was one of my handful of records that I had in my room with my little record player, and I played it over and over again. I have a lot of thoughts on the music and on the album, which has songs that are not in the film. But we'll get to that later. I'm curious to hear whether Scott saw this in theaters or not.
I did not, and I also, and when we talked about this on the old show, this is, in fact, going back to Letterboxd, realizing, the last time I saw this was before we talked about it. And one of the last few it was November of 2019 that we talked about this, probably one of the last 5 or 6 episodes of the old show. And I referred at that time to having been one of those of an age to have had I believe they were read-along records. Noel, you will correct me if that's what they were called. The ones that I had anyway was that.
Yes, that's not the one that I had, but I did have some that were like that, yes.
Yeah, so these were the ones that you had the little booklet and, the entire, that wasn't just the songs, it was the entire soundtrack of the movie playing out over the course of the thing. And so I was immersed in this, but I don't remember the first time I saw it. It probably was in one of the re-releases. I don't know what year it would have had its re-release. I didn't go back and hunting that up, but I knew it by sound much better and much sooner than I knew it actually watching the movie.
So, I mean, I guess for each of you then, before I describe my limited experience of the film, what is your overall reaction to this movie as a whole before we get into the song-by-song discussion?
I mean, it's not top tier. Let's put it that way. I mean, there are things about it that I do like a lot, and I know we're not talking about the movie, at length here, so I won't dwell too much. But I do kind of like the style of that particular era, that sort of scratchy post 101 Dalmatians style. I mean, this movie basically is, aping 101 Dalmatians, but with a different story, but kind of the same vibe in a lot of ways, both in the look and the focus on the small animals and their cute reactions. I don't know. It's kind of a lot of nothing though. There's really not a whole lot to the movie, and there are lots of things about that are choices that were made that feel very much of what this time was like at Disney. Where things were kind of being done more by committee than by strong creative voices, and you can kind of tell that in some of the ways that, a very, very little attempt is made to do anything that is interesting, or controversial or striking. I mean, everything is very, very safe, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, much like the other films of this era, the early 70s and late 60s, it's a movie that exists more nostalgic in my imagination than in its actual quality. And it's like, oh, I remember it so well, and then you actually see it, and it like me going back to the Roger Moore James Bond films. It's really not a good idea to fiddle with those memories that it's like, oh, it was so wonderful, and then you watch it as an adult and you think,
Yeah, I think the high point is seeing that Buena Vista logo at the beginning, which is that was Wonderful World of Disney on Sunday nights whenever they showed one of the movies, which was not very often, but a couple times a year. That was special, right? So it's like seeing the swirling CBS special. It kind of gives you that feeling of something amazing is about to happen on TV. That and then the opening credits with kind of the sketchy drawings of the cats is also cool. After that,
Yeah, so a few points of context. The internet tells me that there were 2 different re-releases of the Aristocats, one in 1980 and one in 1987. So it's possible that, you were both, I mean, Noel, you might be a skosh younger than Scott, so you might have seen the Aristocats when you were age 10. Who's to say? I don't know that I saw the 1987 re-release. I was not born in 1980. I'm sure that I saw it on VHS, but I don't remember distinctly enough the first time that I saw the movie. And I will be, as neither of you will be surprised, and I'm sure many of our listeners will be unsurprised, I'm not even going to be generous. This movie is bad. This movie is very bad. I think it is fascinating to note. I know that I said as much on the old show way back in the early days before Scott was my co-host. I would go on at length about I would argue, undeniable pro-dog, anti-cat agenda of a number of early Disney films. And again, the evidence is undeniable when you think about a movie like Cinderella, where the evil stepmother's cat isn't just a nasty cat, it's named Lucifer, as if it's the devil. Or in Lady and the Tramp, it's not just that the movie depicts cats with a ridiculous and racist Asian stereotype, which we might just have to talk about later. It's that they are these nasty, evil characters who are doing things in a way to get our heroic dog in trouble. But I think it is equally funny that the two Disney animated films that are undeniably about heroic domesticated cats, there's this and there's Oliver and Company. In my mind, those are two of the worst Disney animated features. They're not the worst. This is not the absolute worst. That's Chicken Little. But this is like bottom 5 for me, probably, because it's funny, Noel, how different people can be. You were saying you love that sketchy drawing style. I hate it so much. I can't, and I know, listen, I just wrote about the 65th anniversary of 101 Dalmatians at Crooked Marquis, specifically the xerography style, which began with that film and was utilized a lot in the later 60s movies like The Jungle Book. In this movie, absolutely. My internet may not be flawless, but there were a number of moments where I was watching this on Disney Plus a couple of days ago and I was like, this movie looks terrible. Like this, like I just find that style to be incredibly off-putting in a way. And I know that there are animators who spoke at the time, and some may now say the same thing, where they like the style of xerography because it takes out the inking style. It allows kind of their initial drawings to be represented in the final product. And I can understand why an artist would want that. And as a non-artist myself, I would say that looks sloppy to me. It looks lazy. And I would also argue that lazy is a good word for this movie as a whole. It is a very, very laid back film. It may not be as lazy as Robin Hood, which, Scott, I know you and I talked about here on this show a little while ago in terms of copying over older films. This one, I think, is the source of copying in Robin Hood in one case. But there's just I don't know, Noel, if you used the phrase exactly, but there's a line from an old episode of The Simpsons where Lunch Lady Doris, I forget the context, says, it's a whole lot of nothing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what this feels like. And growing up as I did in the Disney Renaissance, when these movies felt like they were major events, this does not, even though it was released on Christmas Eve, that's no joke, Christmas Eve 1970, which implies an event status now. I'm assuming, I don't know for sure. I don't know if Christmas Eve or Christmas week releases were quite as big of a deal back in 1970. This just feels very, very lazy. And unfortunately for me, like I'm looking at the 5 songs, and I want to note there are technically 5 songs in this film.
Yeah.
I think we'll talk about why the word technically is used here later, because if you're out there listening, you might say, oh, do you mean the reprise of Everybody Wants to Be a Cat as one of those 5? No, I don't. I mean a different one that we'll kind of talk about later. What I was like, one of these songs is okay. One of these songs starts out okay and then gets extremely problematic. And you both know what song I mean. And then there's 2 songs that I kind of can't stand. Like, I remember when we talked about Robin Hood, Scott, I noted that it was interesting to talk about a movie that I don't like, but the movie that has some songs that I think are really good. This is not that. This is a movie that I don't like that mostly has songs I also don't like. And speaking of that, the first of those songs, fittingly, we've already referenced how the opening credits have that sketchy visuals. And we're not saying sketchy to be dicey, like literally sketches, to be very clear. And it plays over the opening song, which shares the film's title, The Aristocats. This is one of 3 songs written by Robert and Richard Sherman. These are, of course, the beloved songwriting brothers who you know best from movies like Mary Poppins. This is, in fact, the last Disney film that they wrote songs for over 3 decades, because they were not very pleased at the post-Walt Disney's passing direction of Walt Disney Studios. So, and it also comes into play with the fact that a number of songs they wrote for this movie did not make the cut, or potentially in one case, kind of made the cut, but kind of didn't. But yeah, so let's talk first about The Aristocats, which is also notable because it is performed by Maurice Chevalier. He was lured out of retirement. I love that phrase, lured out of retirement, like Disney, left some bonbons nearby and they just lured him into a recording studio. Sacre bleu, you caught me. That's, by the way, don't worry, folks. I'm going to do my terrible French voice in a couple minutes. What do the 2 of you think about, as a song, The Aristocats. See, I just did it right there.
So here's the thing. So if I were to rank the 5 songs, and I know that there's one of them we're going to deal with later on, and you may have that at the bottom of your list for obvious reasons. But for me, this is the worst of the 5. I just don't think it's a very interesting song. Using Maurice Chevalier to sing it, or say it, I guess really, Maurice Chevalier doesn't really sing, is weird because he doesn't appear in the film anywhere else. One of the things I found interesting about the Aristocats, the music in it, is in the various ways it kind of apes the classic movie musicals of the 50s and 60s. And Maurice Chevalier was a major part of that. He appeared in a lot of those, particularly early 60s musicals and late 50s musicals, doing his inimitable sort of talk singing style with kind of a roguish French you know, which is not my favorite, quite honestly. It's not my favorite era of movie musical, and it's not my favorite style. So yeah, this is, again, I don't, not only do I not think this is much of the song, I don't really understand the decision beyond just the fact that we needed to establish that this is Paris, which otherwise, quite honestly, aside from the pictures of the Eiffel Tower, the Paris/France elements of this movie are like totally an afterthought. Yeah. So yeah, you know, other than that, it's I don't quite get the choice here, and I don't think it necessarily works.
You know, I don't care for the performance, and it's funny because, you know, not surprisingly, this would have been my first exposure to Maurice Chevalier, and I have this, you know, voice in my head from all those years of listening to that record. And then when I actually started going back and watching Maurice Chevalier movies and realizing it's like he was such a character that having just sort of throwing him into this does feel weird. Again, not something I was thinking about as a kid listening to this thing, but it's just, he has his own thing, and it was the cat, you know, a lot of the pre-code, very caddish behavior, and but I like the tune. I like the bounciness of the tune. I just don't think the performance or the way that it appears in the movie adds anything to anything. Again, I've heard it so many times that I could, you know, probably dream it at this point, but I just don't know that I don't think it's that bad. It's just not interesting enough to stand on its own with some of the other weird choices being made in terms of its presentation.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is not my least favorite song in the film, but it is my second least favorite. And I will agree, I think the tune is fine. I think that if you're just hearing that by itself, it's all right. I did think to myself as I was watching, would this be better if it was somebody else performing it? Would this be better if somebody else was performing it? Which is not meant to suggest that Maurice Chevalier is automatically bad. I will admit, I know the name. I primarily associate him with Gigi, the 1958 musical that he co-starred in, that I don't know if he got an Academy Award nomination for that one. I believe he has an Academy Honorary Award. But that and the clip of him near the end of that's entertainment, because I've seen that movie a number of times, even when I was a little boy who wanted to be a big boy. But I actually don't know if I've actually seen Gigi before, but I know of him from that. It's funny. I think his voice fits very well because I consider this movie to be lazy, tossed off, awfully pleased with itself, and I would argue that all of those are things that fit for his voice. Now, it is worth noting, this is the last thing he did. He passed away, I think, a year and a half after the movie came out. I had also forgotten, I was just looking now, his last live-action role came in a very different Disney movie from 1967, Monkeys Go Home, which I know I talked about on the old show, and I guarantee I didn't like it very much because I'm not a fan of the 60s, 70s live-action movies either, unfortunately. I get, it's funny, when our last episode, Scott, you and I talked about Fun and Fancy Free, which has a title song over the opening credits. Obviously a lot different because that's a choir-driven performance. Here, it's very much like, look, listen to who we got. We got Maurice Chevalier. Isn't that cool? And then, as you both noted, he's not in the rest of it. So great. We got him for this. But yeah, I am not a huge fan of that song. Now, as we've already mentioned, set in Paris in 1910, I do agree that outside of the initial, like the establishing shot of the Eiffel Tower and the accompanying title card, there's not a ton that establishes this as that specific era of France. I didn't know if we were meant to be like, with a big song later that comes in, I wasn't sure if it's like, is this meant to be around the height of the Moulin Rouge era or something? My French history is very lacking, so I'm forgetting if that would even be the right timing. But
so you don't think that having Pat Buttram and George Goober Lindsay in your film grounds it as being?
No, you know what it grounds it as? And Noel, I'm glad you brought it up, whether you meant to or not. I'll tell you another thing that I associate with these 60s/70s era Disney movies that I don't like is, hey, let's get half of the supporting cast from the rural purge type of CBS sitcoms. We have Ava Gabor from Green Acres. We have Pat Buttram. We have Goober Pyle. George Lindsay. That I just feel like that crops up a lot where it's like sitcom actors in these movies. And I know that an actor like Pat Buttram was in a number of Disney animated films and other animated films, but I do associate it with that. And I don't do so positively, as I'm sure you can both tell. So anyway, for people who are out there listening, just to ground them in terms of where each of the songs comes up after our title song. Duchess, played by Eva Gabor, she is one of our main characters. She has 3 kittens, Berlioz, Marie, and Toulouse. They live in great comfort in Paris with Madame Adelaide Bonnefamille, who I want to note, voiced by Hermione Baddeley, who, Scott, do you know that we talked about a movie that she was in very recently on this podcast?
Oh, yes, I do.
I did not realize until I looked it up that she is the same actress who plays the very cockney staff member in the Banks household in Mary Poppins. Mm-hmm. So I note it because obviously great actors can do lots of different types of roles. She sounds 1,000% different in this movie, and it's obviously it's one of the most impressive parts of the film, which shows you how much I like this movie. But anyway, so they live in great comfort with the Madame and her English butler, Edgar, voiced by Roddy Maud Roxby. They're living at large. One day, the Madame is getting her will ready with the loopy old man next door, who happens to be a lawyer, I guess. That's the kind of stuff, by the way, that I also can't stand. The loopy, goofy, let's have this silly old man character just because. It just feels like it's there to be easy comic relief. She establishes, though, in this conversation, she wants her fortune first to be left to her cats, and once they have all passed away, any of the remaining fortune would revert directly to Edgar. Edgar overhears this. As I alluded to earlier, he is under the impression that Cat's 9 lives thing is, like, real, and so he does some very shaky math. Now, here's the only thing that I'm going to say. Obviously, what Edgar does to attempt to get rid of the cats, he's going to put them in sleeping pills. He drives them out in the countryside with the assumption that they will just wander the fields and plains. Madame will come back, think that they've vanished and she can't get them back. She'll die of natural causes, one assumes, and he'll get all the money. Maybe he'll try to kill her too. I don't know. The point being, and I should establish, I'm a cat person. I have 3 cats at home. I am a pro cat person, and I am here to tell you, somebody saying I'm giving my fortune over to my cats is stupid. Edgar is not wrong to think that his boss is an idiot for giving her money to her cats, because let's be honest, they're not spending it. He's spending it for them. It's just like all the rest of it. He's obviously not a good guy, but it's like he's right to be annoyed at her. That's what I would say. Now,
I think you can write the will, I think, to say, I leave my fortune to Edgar with the proviso that he take care of the cats.
Sure.
Anyway,
that would, yes. But of course, if we were to do that, that would avoid Roger Ebert's old idiot plot in which, you know, it has to happen this way or else there is no movie. Anyway, so before his plot gets enacted, before he puts sleeping pills in their cream, we get to see the cats, living their life and practicing their various artistic endeavors, including their scales and arpeggios. Scales and arpeggios is, of course, the second song in the film. And listen, it gives me no pleasure to say this, because Robert and Richard Sherman were each Disney legends in so many ways. I hate this song. I cannot stand this song. I cannot stand this song. Now, the only thing I'm going to give this song credit for is that, at least for the kids, it sure sounds like they are really, like, they're there's nobody singing for them. It's really them singing it. Now, that's the good part. The bad part is the young actress Liz English, who voices Marie, does not sing very well, unfortunately. Now, you could argue that's intentional. She's practicing her scales and arpeggios. She shouldn't be great. But I want to be able to enjoy a song I'm listening to, and she's not good at singing. Roby Lester, who sings in place of Eva Gabor, has a very nice voice. But I found this to be nails on a chalkboard equivalent. What do the two of you think of scales and arpeggios?
I strongly disagree, but I want to hear from Scott first, because I want to see whether I'm fighting against two people or fighting
Yeah, you are fighting against two people. I really do not like this song at all, and it's part of it is, and I think we also talked about this when we talked about Robin Hood, that there was this thing that Disney was doing in this era where they leaned into the adorable kid minor character that was sort of there as our, the presumed audience proxy, the little scamps who run around in Robin Hood, and the puppies in 101 Dalmatians. And those voices were almost inevitably just so annoying. And so it's not just, I find the kittens annoying in general, so giving them an entire song in which their annoyingness can be magnified by the fact that they also can't sing is a problem. And this is probably, I mean, I'd have to sort of go through an entire list. It may be my least favorite Sherman Brothers song in their entire catalog. It's just not good. It's really just not good. So Noel, take it away.
Why do you hate children? Why do you hate kittens and sunshine and joy and music? Okay, so here's the thing. This is as I know you guys both well know, as people who co-host a podcast that deals with things that you probably watched when you were younger and are trying to revisit as you were older. It's hard sometimes to separate your memories of a thing from the thing itself. And so I'll be honest up front. I mean, my memories of being in my room with my little record player, listening to the Aristocats vinyl album and playing scales and arpeggios, at 7, 8 years old, however old I was, it's a strong, warm memory for me. So that's part of it. And even separating out from that, I do take issue with. I understand what you're saying about having the kid voices, it being kind of a trend in Disney at this time. Also, I think a trend in animation at this time. You could say that maybe the Peanuts cartoons on TV, some of the Rankin Bass things as well, also use kid voices. And there was an attempt to kind of capture the realism of the sound of the kid talking as opposed to having it be polished. I like that. I find it kind of charming. I know it's a bit they're doing, but it is charming. I find the fact that they can't sing all that well also charming. So the performance of the song is fine for me. Now, as for the song itself, this is the only one of the three Sherman Brothers songs in the movie that I think is distinctive. Like I said, the Aristocats is nothing. We'll get to the other one later. This is the one that comes closest to at least capturing the kind of thing they did with something like Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious or Spoonful of Medicine. This has a feel, and it's something kind of creative about trying to turn a music lesson into a song that the kittens sing. And I will say one last thing, which is that and again, I know it doesn't matter whether something is for kids or not. It should still be able to stand in and of itself. But this is how I learned about scales and arpeggios.
Well, so two things. One, I hate to be nitpicky, Noel. I believe you meant a spoonful of sugar, not a spoonful of medicine. Which would be a very, very different song indeed. Now, here, the one thing that I will say sincerely goes to what you just said. I did write my notes. In theory, I think what they're doing with this song is very clever because it is written in a way to mimic what scales and arpeggios actually sound like. I acknowledge there is some writerly cleverness in terms of the actual composition of the song. And that is the end of what I will say, to be generous about this song. The rest are I think I get what they're trying to do, but also in real life, when I hear somebody practicing their scales and arpeggios and they're not very good at it, that is not typically what I enjoy listening to in my life. And I say that as an ex-trombone player. When I was practicing my scales, I bet my parents didn't really love hearing that very much in the house. But certainly the nostalgia point is very well made, Noel, and I cannot deny that. I do, though, think, kind of like Scott said, I'd have to look at their entire discography. This might be my least favorite Sherman Brothers song, although technically I could say that about the third song they wrote for this movie, which we'll talk about later. It isn't the next one, though. As I said, after Edgar hears about what Madame's plans are with the will, he puts them to sleep with this sleeping pills crushed into their cream. He drives them on his little motorcycle with a sidecar into the countryside outside of Paris. As Noel referenced, you get Pat Buttram and George Goober Lindsay. And I'm sorry, was he an ex-politician, or who am I thinking of around that era who also was in like a senator? It wasn't George Lindsay, but there was somebody who I'm thinking of from one of these shows who went on to politics. I don't know. I'll have to look that up later.
Me.
Well, I have Noel here as well. I was like, Noel, maybe you know.
I don't know what you're talking about, man. Sorry.
Okay, fair, fine. I'm going to look it up. There's somebody in one of these shows who went on to. It's going to drive me crazy. But anyway, it's neither here nor there. George Goober Lindsay, not who I'm talking about. But the two of them, Pat Buttram and George Lindsay, they show up as dogs, these hound dogs, Napoleon and Lafayette. And I only mention them not because they sing, but because they are part of technically two separate set pieces that feel like one of the things I couldn't stand when I talked about them on the old show on the 60s and 70s live action comedies, which was these extended slapstick sequences. Now, this is obviously animated, but it feels right at home in a live action movie like The Love Bug or Gus. Just exhausting and arguably unnecessary, both because, Edgar's neuroses about getting caught make sense to a point, but two dogs, yeah. I don't know why he's worried about them, and he spends what feels like an hour, and it's really only 5 minutes. Just as I put in my notes, a lot of stupid bullshit, no build-up, no payoff. We all know the cats are going to be gone. The dogs aren't involved. He shouldn't be worried about them, and yet a set piece. It's a lot of nothing. So after Edgar finally drives off, the cats wake up. They are, of course, very confused about what's going on, where they are, how they found themselves there. And before long, they meet Thomas O'Malley, voiced by Phil Harris, in the song that literally serves as his introduction. I'd forgotten that it's not even any dialogue or build-up. The very first line of anything that Phil Harris has are the first lyrics of Thomas O'Malley Cat, written by Terry Gilkyson, who you may recall, if you know your Disney music well, because he wrote The Bare Necessities in the Jungle Book. Obviously, this feels like a very similar type of song as, hey, we're going to have the big Phil Harris intro song. Can you write this one as well? I get what this song is doing, and it's okay. Talking about nails on a chalkboard, the actual character's name is Abraham DeLacy Giuseppe Casey Thomas O'Malley. That is not how Phil Harris pronounces those words. His pronunciation of Giuseppe is very interesting and drove me crazy. So that's unfortunate because that's a good chunk of his opening lyric. What did the two of you make of Thomas O'Malley Cats?
I like it. I mean, it is, like you say, bare necessities. I mean, he's basically a very Baloo-esque character to begin with, and they kind of don't disguise that with his introductory song. I've spent most of my life kind of humming to myself, Giuseppe Casey. So, I mean, I can't hard for me to separate, my memories from the song itself. I think it's a very snappy little song. I don't know. It's for one thing, it's got probably the most memorable melody of the 5 songs. It could get stuck in your head. I think more than almost any of the other songs of these 5. For better or worse, you may not like having Giuseppe Casey running through your head the whole time. Also, I just kind of I do like Phil Harris. Of course, Phil Harris was a staple of these movies, Jungle Book, and then of course he comes back again in Robin Hood. I think that's the only 3 from this era. I think he's also in maybe one of the later ones. But he's got a very distinctive voice. He was on radio with Jack Benny. He had a really, I recommend checking it out sometime, a really fun novelty song called The Thing. during the whole science fiction boom of the 50s. Very clever, goofy little song. It's kind of a jazz cat, and I talk about how the tradition of the musicals of the past, they kind of get revived in some of these Disney songs. The jazz hepcat song is also a very common trope in 50s musicals, and typically a white guy is the jazz hepcat. And we'll revisit that later because I have definitely have thoughts on that. But Phil Harris came by it honestly. I mean, he was part of that world, and so I don't know. I think it's a catchy song.
I mean, it's one that I really enjoy. When we were talking about Fun and Fancy Free last time, we were referring to the idea of how this was one of those where it had a lot of different songwriters contributing to it, and that was a case where it didn't necessarily feel like the same kind of cohesiveness that later Disney features had when they had a single composer sort of giving it its voice. And I don't think that I had the same. If years ago, before I knew who the Sherman Brothers were, if you just sort of dropped me in and said, is there some sort of different songwriter doing these? I don't think I would have been able to identify this. It feels like it belongs. It's perfectly fine, although it obviously is like write me another Bare Necessities type of song, but it does that, and it is catchy to me. It is one that, again, years and years of, I could still hear that presentation of sipping the cup of life with my fingers curled. So I've got, that is embedded in my brain forever. And, I just think that it, as much of a Bare Necessities wannabe as it is, it's good enough to do that. And I don't really, considering how little else is going on, I'm more ready to listen to this song than I am to listen to a lot of what else is going on in this movie. And of course, there's also and I don't know if we've talked about this in other things, and I'm sure Noel is also aware of the musical legacy of Terry Gilkyson in terms of his progeny. Noel, yes?
I'm drawing a blank. You may have stumped me on this.
His son, Tony Gilkyson, who was a member of Lone Justice and X.
Oh my God! Okay, now I'm excited. That song is great. What's your problem? Isn't it a great song?
I don't understand that reference, unfortunately for me, but that's okay. Something to learn. Now, here, two things. First of all, I did a little digging while you both were talking. I was confusing Fred Grandy from The Love Boat, who played Gopher on The Love Boat. The thing about which politician, actor, that's who I meant. I meant Fred Grandy. I don't know why that name sticks in my head, because I never watched The Love Boat.
Also one of the Dukes of Hazzard characters, the guy who played Roscoe Coltrane, the sheriff, I think was also a politician. I think. I feel like Fred Grandy was a Republican, but I think that Roscoe Coltrane was a Democrat. So
okay,
it balances out. The big super southerny, the big super southerny guy was a Dixiecrat southerner, and then Fred Grandy was Fred Grandy.
There you go. But so I will also say, in terms of this song, I did put it in my notes. This is probably Thomas O'Malley Cat is probably my favorite song in the film. In that it is my least hated. That is direct word for word what I wrote in my notes. Because I mean it is not as good as the Bare Necessities, but as a secondary version of that, it's like, it's fine. I just think it's, it is a sign of we're going to do this. This will be a reheated version of something we've already done, which is only so interesting to me. Now, that said, there is a fairly long gap after Thomas O'Malley Cat in our next song, because the next chunk of the movie is largely about Duchess and Thomas falling in love with each other. Thomas, in spite of being this laid-back alley cat, he quickly gets emotionally close with Duchess and with her kittens. He rescues them. There is then this long bit, speaking of sitcoms, with Monica Evans and Carol Shelley from The Odd Couple as Amelia and Abigail Gabble. Now, we noted Monica Evans and Carol Shelley are both in Robin Hood, because Monica Evans voices Maid Marian there. Carol Shelley voices Lady Cluck. I like them better in Robin Hood, in that I really found them exhausting in this. Those characters, Amelia and Abigail Gabble, do not sing, but those two geese plus their drunken Uncle Waldo, there's a lot of business with them. Uncle Waldo, voiced by Bill Thompson, who I believe,
legendary voice actor of Droopy Dog.
Yes, well, and he is. But I heard his voice and was like, oh yeah, that's the other king in Sleeping Beauty, because he voices King Hubert there. But he is also he voiced Mr. Smee in Peter Pan. He played the White Rabbit in Alice in Wonderland. He was on Fibber McGee and Molly back in the old days. You know what else, Scott? He was a semi-regular on a radio series hosted by Edgar Bergen. Speaking of fun,
really?
Well, yeah. Noel, for your background, neither of us are big fans of Edgar Bergen, as we discussed in the last episode. Sorry to him and to his family. But anyway, so there's a whole lot of nonsense, including, I should note, Edgar realizes he left a couple of his possessions in the countryside during that first run-in with Napoleon and Lafayette. He's worried that those will be found, that he will be found out as this underhanded criminal trying to get the cats out of the way, trying to get his hands on Madame's fortune. Eventually, the cats meet up with Thomas O'Malley's friend, who I just want to note, right before the song, Thomas is like, oh yeah, they're schwingers, baby. And she says, schwinger? What is a schwinger? Which I mostly laughed at because, as I put in my notes, what indeed, gold member?
It's
anyway,
schwinger. It's schwinger.
Yeah, again, it just sounds like Mike Myers in that awful Austin Powers movie. But after that, we lead into, we meet Scat Cat, voiced by the legendary actor Scatman Crothers, who, easy reference, if you've seen The Shining, you know who Scatman Crothers is. He plays Halloran there. He was in a lot of different TV shows, movies. He was in Hello, Dolly. He was in a number of other Jack Nicholson films, I should note. But he is, of course, in this as Scat Cat. And very quickly, we dive into the film's big centerpiece, show-stopping number, a song called Everybody Wants to Be a Cat. Now, I have a lot to say about this one, but I want to let the two of you weigh in first. What did the two of you think of Everybody Wants to Be a Cat?
Okay, I'm going to take this one first this time, because
Go for it.
I understand there are problems with this song. One particular problem, which we'll get to later. But I love this song. This is my favorite song in the entire movie. It rocks. I think the performance of it rocks, except for the thing.
The thing.
I like the way that it ends with it being such a total barn burner that they actually literally destroy the house they're playing it in, because it's so exciting. Speaking to the movie musical tradition, this is also kind of a grand tradition dating back to movies like Good News. A lot of the MGM musicals always had some sort of a quasi-gospel number kind of put in there. Again, oftentimes sung by white people, but it was a way to kind of bring in a little bit of soul into these films. I feel like this is part of that tradition, and so I like it for that reason. And I much like Thomas O'Malley, I kind of can't get it out of my head. I've been, as I was preparing for this podcast, I've been walking around with my wife on our morning walks, occasionally just singing, about squares. Don't let there be a square in the act. You set music back to the caveman days, or just casually adding "rinky tinky tinky." Anyway, so I on the basis of just the song itself, barring the thing, and we're gonna get to the thing. I think this song kicks ass, and it's like one of my favorite Disney songs.
I'm probably going to land somewhere in the middle, in that I think it's weird. It's a very interesting construction, because you start with this very, doom, doom. It's very downbeat, and you have this sort of mellow vibe. It's the cool baby kind of thing going on. Then you have a harp interlude. You have a harp interlude in this jazzy song, and then you have that da 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 da. And so it's like three different songs put together. So it's not boring. It's just different. But the Scatman Crothers portion of it and the Phil Harris portion of it, I like quite a bit. I just sort of like that mellow vibe that it's going for. Unfortunately, we also get to have the kid voices come in there again, and yes, that is another thing that I'm not fond of. So there are parts of it I really like, and then I realize, oh, wait a minute, this isn't all that there is to this song, and it's a completely different song in parts, and it's just strange.
It's the Bohemian Rhapsody of Disney songs.
It really is. It really is. It has an overture and a coda and a third act and a intermezzo, and yes, it's the whole thing. It's the whole package.
Well, there's a lot going on here. I do sincerely agree. Yes, there is this song has. It is a major piece of music within the film. It is the center of the film in a lot of ways. I don't know if I'm going to quite go to it's the Bohemian Rhapsody of Disney music, because that's maybe a little flattering to a song where we haven't talked about the thing.
Yeah, the thing.
But hang on, before I get to that, now I will say, even if I can compartmentalize and not think about the thing, I think the first half of the song is okay. I think I like it when it's a little slower. It's got a kind of a slinkier tone. It's charming. I don't think it's as good as anything from Jungle Book, just in terms of recent Disney films at that time. I think once the tempo speeds up, it's not just that it becomes problematic, because it is not really problematic until that point. I would say the climax, the part where it's basically bringing the house down literally, I was thinking about, I want to say it's a season 2 episode of Arrested Development called Afternoon Delight. I forget exactly why Job is in charge of the holiday party in this episode, but he is. And nobody at the Bluth family business is really partying. And so he gets on the mic and says, "Hey, everybody, dance now." Silence. Then he looks at them and he does his, the Will Arnett, I'm Batman voice. "Everybody dance now." And that is how Everybody Wants to Be a Cat sounds to me in the climax, where they're shouting it. And basically it's like The Secret. If I put it into reality, it will come true. They can shout it all they like, but I don't believe it. And so I don't like that. But also there's, the thing. So if I may, indulge me, please. I remember leading up, it's funny, Scott, you mentioned that the last time we discussed this was in the late months of 2019. And at that time, I forget if we happened to discuss this before or immediately after Disney Plus launched in November of 2019. I remember that obviously there was a lot of media coverage leading up to that event. And one piece of interesting coverage that ties in here was that there were rumors that certain Disney films, like Dumbo specifically, were going to either be completely unable to watch or heavily revised because of the fact that they had racist content. In the case of Dumbo, there were people saying, oh, well, they took the When I See an Elephant Fly song out entirely. And I remember at the time thinking, well, that's stupid, because while I agree that song is problematic, if you take out the song where Dumbo flies, you kind of don't have a movie, because Dumbo flying is kind of the big image we all have from that film. Now, on Disney Plus's launch day, literally the first thing I did was see if Dumbo was the same. It was, except there was a little title card at the very front of that movie and a number of other movies that was, legalese boilerplate that all but amounted to Disney saying, listen, some of our movies have racist stuff in them. That's old stuff. We're sorry. Please enjoy. The Aristocats was also one of those films, unsurprisingly, but here's the reason why I mention it. What I remember part of that disclaimer did was it linked to a website, disney.com/storiesmatter, which, by the way, no longer exists because, as I'm sure you both know, woke is dead, and you can say whatever you want now. It's fine. It's okay. We're not recording this the day after the Grammys and after a certain person threatened a comedian because he made a joke that somebody didn't like. Anyway, comedy is legal, and so is everything else in music, so it's okay. We don't need to talk about the inclusivity aspect of Disney, but that website used to talk about how Disney had made strides in its cultural representations, and it used some examples of how far Disney had to work from. Dumbo was one example, and so was Aristocats. And in case you're wondering why I didn't say the Aristocats, it's because, if my memory serves me correctly, they got the title wrong on the website. It just said Aristocats. Way to go, Disney. But it also included an image from this song, featuring a character helpfully credited in the opening as Chinese Cat, voiced by Paul Winchell, who people probably know as the voice of Tigger. Now, Scat Cat is not the only cat who is singing this song. It's not just him and Duchess and Thomas O'Malley. It's all these other cats who, similar to Lady and the Tramp, a movie that traffics in a lot of different cultural stereotypes. There are a lot of cultural stereotypes with the cats. There's an English cat who looks kind of like a hippie. There's an Italian cat named Peppo. There's a Russian cat voiced by Thurl Ravenscroft, and there is a Chinese cat. Online, I see his name as Shun God, but in the movie, he's only called Chinese Cat. And the first time we see him do something in the song, he slams a cymbal on his head, making it look like he is a stereotypical Chinese person working in, I assume they meant to be like a rice paddy. And then he has a lyric that includes the phrase, "Fortune cookies always wrong." Now, obviously, I'm going to say this, I'm going to speak for all three of us. This is an extremely insultingly racist moment. And I mentioned Lady and the Tramp before, and I was thinking about it as I watched this song. The Siamese Cat song is undeniably racist in its depiction of Asian people through these cats. Having said that, there is a purpose to that song, not just to traffic in racist stereotypes, but within the story of Lady and the Tramp, the cats need to do something to upset their owner and also make their owner think that Lady committed these terrible acts instead. Lady needs to get out of the house. That's part of her story. She needs to explore the world. There's literally no reason for this cat to be in this movie. This lyric does not need to exist. You could take this part of the song out and it would not be much different, if different at all. So that to me is why I can't really get into the even mildly positive part, which is I agree that there are essentially 2 or 3 songs in one here. One of these songs fully doesn't need to be in the movie, and I would argue it drags it down a lot. Now, my fellow straight white men, what do you think?
You mentioned
either of you, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So you mentioned the warnings beforehand, and it's funny. My wife and I, whenever we see like a cultural stereotype in anything, we look at each other and we say, "It was wrong then, and it's wrong now," which is I think the Leonard Maltin thing that he says before, like old Looney Tunes. Anyway, yeah, no, it's bad, and it's what's here's the thing. My memory could be faulty, but my memory is that my record album version of this song did not have that part. Not for any cultural reasons. I think they just tightened it up. It also did not have the harp solo, the harp portion. It was a really kind of compressed. It had the beginning part and then the big jam part at the end, and so the middle section was elided quite a bit. However, that album did have Siamese Cat song. And so in my mind, I always associate the Aristocats with the Siamese Cat song, even though it's not from that movie. And so I always think about the Aristocats as being problematic because of the Siamese Cat song, which is not in the film. And yet there is this other thing. Anyway, we'll other point. Yeah, no, you're right. It has no reason to be there. It's just a tossed off racist joke. And it does, and it's not part of my lasting core memories of the song. But that's on me. It's there. I can't pretend it's not there. It's not great.
No, I mean, yes, you even mentioned part of it. It's like fortune cookie always wrong. It's like, what is he rhyming with it? Egg foo young is just rattling off a bunch of Chinese foods titles and the buck teeth and the whole thing. It's just it's pretty awful. Shanghai. Well, it's funny you mentioned the Leonard Maltin thing because I think it's. What I know those from is the tins, the Disney Masterpiece collections or that wasn't what they were called. What was now? It's the.
I had them all, like the vault or the something. I have them.
Yes, but that was the intros were always the apology is and so forth were very prevalent in that. So it was something that was. Being very thoughtful about. Again, is this something that anyone is actually paying attention to now? It's not there at the beginning of this movie when I saw it.
It's not there at all in any of their movies anymore. No. I told you guys, woke is dead. It's fine.
Yeah. So it's bad, and I don't know what else there is to say about it. It's bad.
Well, here again, the iteration I'll make is because of that, like I can only compartmentalize so much about the rest of the song. Now, that said, I do want to note, so the song was written by Floyd Huddleston and Al Tinker. Floyd Huddleston is a name you might recognize. We talked about a song he wrote and was Oscar nominated for, when we discussed Robin Hood, he and George Bruns wrote the song Love. He wrote lyrics to a song in Midnight Cowboy. He worked for a very long time. So as we mentioned, after this, there is the cats are back in Paris. They get back to Madame's home. There is a final big action sequence when Edgar tries to ship them to Timbuktu. He doesn't, of course. There's some back and forth, also including their mouse friend Roquefort. And, some actors can have all sorts of different roles, and yet you associate them with one. I don't know why in this specific case, every time I watch this and hear Roquefort, I think, no, Sterling Holloway, you're Winnie the Pooh. I can't buy you as a mouse named Roquefort, but he is playing such a character here. As we mentioned, though, there is technically a fifth song in this film, written by the Shermans. And you can both keep me honest here. I believe within the context of the movie, which does list this song, She Never Felt Alone, in the opening credits, performed by Roby Lester, it's only really the first part of the verse that is used in dialogue here, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's talked, it is spoken, and as Duchess is sort of reflecting on, leaving Madame alone.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to acknowledge that it's kind of, sort of here, but not really, and certainly not to the extent that the Shermans had actually written it to be. I believe that it does exist in some of the other versions of the album. This was given a soundtrack in 2015 as part of the Legacy collection, so I believe it certainly is captured there. I don't know, Noel, was it in that record that you listened to all those years ago, if you remember?
Yeah, because it was an 8-song record, and the first 4 songs included that, and then side 2 begins with Everybody Wants to Be a Cat, followed by Thomasina, That Darn Cat, and then ended with the Siamese Cat song.
Wow. Well, there you go.
very cat heavy. But this, yeah. I mean, the cut scene, because it was animated, animated to be a full scene, and you can see it on YouTube, you can watch the whole bit, and I think that there's a lot of interesting concepts to me about what things are cut for pacing, and I get it, but the fact is that there's a lot of this movie that could be cut for pacing, and you'd end up having virtually no movie left. And there's you mentioned those. Basically, it's the 3 Edgar in trouble scenes. Those are the only action that's actually going on. There's nothing. I'm almost literal about this. If you take those 3 scenes out, is there anything happening in this movie that's not just cats walking along and talking to one another?
Yeah, not much. I'll be honest with you. Once I got to the end of Everyone Wants to Be a Cat and realized there wasn't really much music left, I think I stopped. There was like 10 minutes to go in the movie, and the Grammys were starting, and I was like,
Now, okay, you mentioned the Grammys, Noel, and I actually wanted to bring this up because while none of these songs were nominated for an Academy Award in 1970, and in case anybody is curious, the winning song was a song called For All We Know from a movie called Lovers and Other Strangers. I have never heard of that song. The Scrooge song, Thank You Very Much, got nominated that year, did not win. However, it is it might be the actual album you're referring to, Noel, The Story of the Aristocats. I don't know if it's the exact same as what you're referring to, but
that's probably Scott's. That's probably Scott's album.
Okay, so I mentioned it for 2 reasons. Roby Lester appears there again. She provided the singing voice for Eva Gabor both in this film and in The Rescuers, interestingly enough. And that album was nominated for a Grammy in the Best Children's Music Album category in 1971. I will say it's one of those cases where the deck was stacked against the Aristocats because the other nominees included A Boy Named Charlie Brown, Rubber Ducky, Susan Sings Songs from Sesame Street, say that 10 times fast, and the winning album was Sesame Street because it clearly was right after that show premiered. I only also want to mention, and I mean this is, I'm not even going to say anything except for the album that won the following year, titled Bill Cosby Talks to Kids About Drugs. Moving on. So
wrong then, wrong now.
Yes, it was. So I also want to note this movie was a big hit when it came out in 1970. It is still the 20th highest grossing film of all time in France. which I guess makes sense. It made lots and lots of money here and overseas. It was relatively well liked when it was released in theaters. Again, no Academy Award nominations. It did get a nomination in the AFI 10 Top 10 for animation back in 2008. Did not get there. I had also forgotten until looking today, this was going to be given a direct-to-video sequel in the mid-2000s until John Lasseter, speaking of wrong then, wrong now, but he was right about this. He nixed all of the future sequels that Disney Toon Studios was going to make. I don't disagree with that decision. Apparently, the plot was going to center around Marie becoming smitten by another kitten aboard a luxury cruise ship. Fun. And and I will also note, there have been rumblings in the last few years about turning this into a live-action remake, a.k.a. a live-action remake with CGI cats. Most recently, Questlove, speaking of musicians, was going to direct the movie, but last summer he said that apparently it is not moving forward. I have nothing against Questlove, in spite of the fact that he works with Jimmy Fallon. I'm not going to hold that against him too strongly, but also, to the points we're just making, I don't know what a live-action remake of this movie would look like, because it's pretty action-light, I would argue. But yeah, I mean, and I would also, the only other thing I want to call out before I toss over to Scott for any covers you might have found, this is a movie that has a surprisingly long tail at the theme parks, because I remember on my honeymoon, I want to say, it might have been a future trip to Disney World, because we went on our honeymoon to Disney World. My wife and I saw Marie as a meet and greet character at the French Pavilion of Epcot. It makes sense because France, but also it's, I remember at the time being like, this movie? Really? They have a character from this movie? Okay, sure, I guess.
I mean, especially when they can do Belle.
That is true, and they do sometimes. Now, Scott, speaking of covers, I know you are just wrapping up your Sundance coverage. Did you have a chance to spot any covers? I can imagine a few covers of some of these songs.
There have been surprisingly few. There was so in 1971, shortly after this came out, there was a full cover version album by the Richard Wolf Children's Chorus. So if you, like me, just adore the sound of children's voices singing all these Aristocats songs, boy, do I have an album for you. So there's that, which was not good. And the thing is that of all the songs in this, the only one that has really gotten any kind of traction is Everybody Wants to Be a Cat.
Sure.
The most notable cover version of it being, perhaps not surprisingly, by that stray cat himself, the Brian Setzer Orchestra. And it's, if you know either Brian Setzer from Stray Cats or the Brian Setzer Orchestra, you can probably get a good sense of how he would approach Everybody Wants to Be a Cat. And it's a fun version. It's worth seeking out for a little bit of a different perspective on the song. One that does not include the thing.
Can I just tell you, I wanted right now to verify if I could make this joke. I was going to say, speaking of swingers, because I would have assumed that something from Brian Setzer is on the soundtrack to the movie Swingers. But it's not. There's a lot more Big Bad Voodoo Daddy on that album. Did it? I guess so. Well, I mean, I think that's all that I've got, though, for the Aristocats. Anything else that either of you would want to share about this one before we wrap it up?
I have two little notes that I just want to go back and clean up. One of which is that Scatman Crothers singing in Everyone Wants to Be a Cat, from what I read on the Wikipedia. Apparently they wanted Louis Armstrong for that role and couldn't get him. So he's was advised to do kind of a Louis Armstrong imitation. And knowing that before watching it this time, I was like, yeah, I can hear that. It's hard to not be Scatman Crothers. He has such an it's an identifiable voice, but I could tell he was trying to do a little bit more of a Louis Armstrong thing. Also, we were talking about Thomas O'Malley Cat. I forgot my favorite line, which is him saying that he is showing off my éclat.
Yes.
That's a good call. And yes, Louis Armstrong, he passed away, I think, only a handful of months after this film came out. So yeah, I would imagine I could see him doing this well. And now that you mentioned it, it's like, yeah, I can hear that in Scatman Crothers' voice. Because again, if you know him as I do from things like The Shining or from 70s era sitcoms like Chico and the Man, he doesn't
or Hong Kong Phooey.
Duh. There you go.
Speaking of the thing,
Yeah, well. Well, okay, I think with all that in mind, we can head out. We can wrap things up. So, Scott, why don't you take us out?
so with that, it's time to turn down the volume on Mousterpiece Melodies. What's on the playlist for our next episode? We promise this time, the Country Bears. And while you wait, make sure you subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcasts. Noel Murray, thank you again so much for joining us today. I know we mentioned some of your credits at the top of the show, but as a reminder, can you please let listeners know the best place to find you and your work online?
Yeah, I typically post links to anything I've done on my Blue Sky account. I am Noel Mew, Noelmu, at Blue Sky. And you can find, again, I post links to things I do for Vulture, AV Club, elsewhere.
All right. And of course, we'd love for all of you to listen along and tell us what you think. Do you love the songs of the Aristocats? All of them? Every part of all of them? Maybe I don't want to know if you do, because we might have some differences. But if you do have any comments, questions, or opinions you'd like to share, you can always reach me at mousterpiececinema@gmail.com. You can follow me on Blue Sky at Mousterpiece. As mentioned, I write at outlets such as Crooked Marquee, such as Episodic Medium, where later this month, once the Olympics are over, I will be back on the Elspeth/Matlock beat. I will also, later this month, at the AV Club, be doing a season review of Scrubs Season 10. I hear, courtesy of Noel Murray, that they are trying to say it's Season 1, and no, it's not. It's Season 10. I watched Season 1 in high school. We can say whatever we like, but it's not Season 1. But anyway, keep an eye on. I'll post links on Mousterpiece at Blue Sky. Scott, where can our listeners find you online?
Well, maybe we can consider it Scrubs Born Again. Maybe
Really, Scrubs Born Again twice, because they already did a reboot season in a way.
Right.
Go ahead.
Anyway, yes, you can find me on Letterboxd at Scott Renshaw and Blue Sky at Scott Renshaw, and of course my primary outlet, Salt Lake City Weekly, for new reviews of theatrical films is cityweekly.net, and I'm Scott Renshaw.
And I'm Josh Spiegel, and we'll see you all next time on Mousterpiece Melodies.